Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the continuing series of presentations on the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. My name is Isaac Kamande. As a reminder, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement came into force in January 2021. The agreement moves Africa closer to the realization of the African Economic Community agreed upon in the Abuja Declaration of 1991. Through the African Union Agenda 2063, the agreement has been ratified as an instrument to make the African continent one market, similar to the European Union and other regional economic communities. To import or export to any country in the world, there are rules and regulations to be followed. The Kenya government prepared the Handbook on Importing and Exporting in Kenya in the year 2005. And the Handbook on Importing and Exporting in Kenya provides useful information to students, businesses, government agencies and departments, county governments, and other players with an interest in import-export business. It contains 7 chapters as follows. The first chapter, which is on introduction, contains the need for the Handbook on importing to and exporting from Kenya, the purpose of the Handbook, the target users, like I have enumerated above, how to use the Handbook, the methodology of the Handbook, and the way the Handbook is organized. Chapter 2 is an overview of international trade, the Kenyan experiences, and it describes the trade activities, exports from Kenya, imports from Kenya, trade in services, trade policy, import and export incentives, and trade agreements. For example, for trade agreements, Kenya has entered into both bilateral and multilateral agreements with other countries, singularly or severally, and these trade agreements are deposited in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for use by Kenyans and others interested in international trade. Chapter 3 contains the main trade facilitation institutions: Customs Clearance and Declaration, Customs Services Department offices, port release. All these are located in the ports of entry and ports of exit. For example, we have the Kenya Ports Authority in Mombasa. We have the Kenya Airports Authority in Jomo Kenyatta International Airport. We have the Kenya Bureau of Standards, that is the standards organization of the country. It both provides services for international trade and also for internal trade. Then there are requirements for compliance with agricultural standards, and that is where we have the Kenya Plant Health Inspectorate Service, or KEFIS. Then, as you are aware, there are very many people who are dealing with avocado pears. There is an organization called the Horticultural Crops Development Authority, and this is the organization that facilitates and regulates the exportation and importation of horticultural products. Then, in order to control pests, we have the Pest Control Products Board, that is the regulator as to the kind of pesticides that can be imported or exported out of the country. Then all of us have to comply with health and safety standards, whether you are producing, whether you are exporting or importing. This has to be complied with. So there are the port health offices that are to be found again in the ports of entry and ports of exit. And then we have a listing of port health offices in this chapter. The chapter continues describing transportation services. We have marine transporters, whereby you use the oceans and with ships and canoes and what have you. We have air transporters, which is facilitated by airplanes. We have rail transport, and recently you're aware of the completion and the working of the standard gauge railway in Kenya. We have road transporters with all these trucks that are plying the Kenyan roads, either bringing products into the country or serving as transit transporters to other countries of East and Central Africa. Then we have the courier or express operators. Majority of you have heard of DHL. post or express services. All these are described in the handbook in order for you to know how they operate. So we have the rail versus road, we have marine versus air, and then as we continue, the handbook tells you on how to go about to decide the mode of transport that you are going to use, whether it's marine transport, whether it's air transport or road transport. Then products for export and import are supposed to be boarded. And there is a description of what is a customs boarded warehouse in the chapter. Then you are shown on how to secure your goods by being told the security services that are available, the financial services that you can get in Kenya in order to facilitate your business, and you're also shown how you can insure your goods, as well as trade and investment promotion. So you'll find that there are institutions and rules that govern trade and investment promotion. In Kenya, we have an organization called Kenya Export Promotion and Branding Agency, and that is the agency that you would have to visit either in person or through their websites in order to understand what trade and investment promotion information that is contained or that you can get from such organizations. That brings us to the end of chapter 3, the content of chapter 3, and chapter 4 is preparing to import and export. How do you go about obtaining market information? If you have some products, you have avocados, you have mangoes, you have oranges, you have t-shirts, you have gearboxes, where do you export them to? Or where do you import them from? So the handbook at the chapter 4 contains information on market information. It also contains information on how you can secure legal aspects, legal protection of the products that you are importing or exporting. And this could be local and international legislation, because there are laws that are national and there are laws that govern international trade. So the handbook in chapter 4 will describe some of these local and international legislation. In order for you to export or import, there are various types of licenses, permits, and certifications that you require. And in chapter 4, you'll find all these described and documented. Then there is the certificate of origin. Certificate of origin is a certificate that describes where the products are coming from and the level of local input that has gone into the production of that product. It is important that you get a certificate of origin while exporting, particularly in the African market, because the receiving country would want to know how much of employment you have created in the country of origin, how much trade you are promoting, and how much business you are promoting in the country of origin. So in order to transact in any business, you need a contract. And the handbook now describes, when you're entering into international trade, the type of contracts that you should enter into between the customer and the supplier. Then financial transactions are many, and the handbook also tells you about financial transactions, availability of finances, how to convert monies and things like those. Then it continues to tell you how to prepare for import payments, because there are rules as to when you pay for the products that you are expecting from these other countries. Issues of letters of credit that you can get from your bank are described in that section of chapter 4. Then preparing for export payments. So you want to export products. When do you expect to be paid for having exported to a particular customer, wherever they are? Then this is followed by chapter 5, which is importing into Kenya. In order to import into Kenya, you need import documentation. You need to prepare these import documents. You need to follow import procedures. You need to ensure the quality of the products that you are offering for export. For import, importation of plant materials into Kenya. You have to document, or you have to inform the authorities on what type of product materials you are bringing into Kenya, because there are some products, there are some plant materials that may be prohibited, some plant materials that may be encouraged. So all this is contained in the handbook on importing and exporting in Kenya, chapter 5. Then valuation of imports, exemption from duty, prohibited and restricted imports. I've just talked about some prohibited plant materials. For example, in Kenya, to import a car, it has to be less than 6 years or 8 years old. I don't remember the latest. But the thing is, you have to show the authorities whether you are bringing in a car that can be allowed to be operated in Kenya. So it's important to know what are the prohibited and restricted imports into Kenya. That brings us to the end of chapter 5, which is importing into Kenya, and it leads us to chapter 6, exporting from Kenya. And in order to export from Kenya, you have to do export documentation. You have to follow export procedures. You have to ensure that your products for export are valued. There is a valuation so that you know what value you are exporting. In order for the government authorities to be able to assess the amount of duty, all this information has to be availed. And similarly, just in the case of imports, there are prohibited and restricted exports. So you're not going to offer for exports elephant tusks. They are restricted and in fact prohibited from being exported from Kenya. So there is a list of products that cannot be exported, and you need to be aware of them in order not to engage in an export business that cannot take off. Then we have the last chapter, which is the rights and obligations of the importer and the exporter. And these rights fall into 4 categories. Rights and obligations regarding customs matters. When you are relating with the customs department of the Kenya Revenue Authority, you have rights and you have obligations. You also have rights and obligations regarding quality standards. You have rights and obligations regarding plant material quality standards. You have rights and obligations regarding public health matters. So that is the end of chapter 7, table of contents. That is the table of contents of the whole handbook on importing and exporting in Kenya. Now you know, and this may influence positively your participation in international trade, either as an exporter, importer, or an investor. Thank you for listening. Next time, we'll cover the content of each of the 7 chapters. You can also download the handbook on importing and exporting in Kenya from the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development. Have a good day.